All right. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Nola Simon. I'm the host of the Hybrid Remote Center of Excellence. And today I'm honored to have Christy Sullivan, who is the founder of the Executive Remote Worker Community. And she is from Minnesota, but is currently in Mexico. And this quarter of the podcast, I've been searching out people who are experiencing better weather than I am. And Christy is one of them. Christy, would you like to introduce yourself in more detail and share a little bit about your story?
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on this podcast. I'm excited to have another fun conversation with you. As you said, I'm currently in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, and the weather here has been pretty hot, sunny in the 80s. Living where growing up in Minnesota is an interesting change because here it's like I live amongst palm trees and definitely no palm trees in Minnesota.
No, my clients used to be in Minnesota. I learned that I did not travel after December. I had a very short travel window if I had to go down. I would travel between May and October, and anything else was like, I've had experience. I'm not doing that. I think there was one time I was driving through like farm fields, and there were all kinds of storm signs basically saying if you got stuck in the snow, you chose to take the road, and you got stuck in the snow, they would not come to rescue you because it was closed certain months. I was like, okay, that's horrifying. You're just gonna die in a field in Minnesota because there's too much snow.
You're on your own.
I can understand your preference for palm trees.
I think it, and I think it started. I was in a role where I had to travel a lot visiting customers, and I had a customer in Galveston, Texas, and I remember him saying that he decided that he would never live anywhere where palm trees couldn't survive. That was how he decided where he was going to live. I thought that was always funny.
That is a good deciding factor on where you actually want to live.
I basically am a full-time traveler. I spent about 20 years working in the corporate world and decided that office with a window wasn't enough. And I made plans to escape just to see what else was out there in the world and how maybe my corporate experience or that 9 to 5 job experience, that office experience could be reimagined on the road, traveling and experiencing the world differently. I basically, the pivotal moment for me was I was sitting in a boardroom when I was working for the software company, and the conversation somehow turned into like life goals, and everyone was sharing their different life goals or dreams. And as if I blacked out, I just blurted that I wanted to live outside the US for at least a month. That to me, that was like the epitome of traveling and experiencing the world. And that was strange because the company I worked for wasn't very remote friendly at the time. It was very office first. Um, but saying that out loud changed something in me. And then from that moment on, this was like early 2019. And from that moment on, I started taking action. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted, but I knew I wanted to experience more of life outside the US. That was my goal. And I decided to first focus on my finances. And I thought I needed to accumulate enough money. I wanted to accumulate enough money to travel for at least a year without having to worry about working. I I did two things really. I basically did a fire sale of all of my stuff. Everything was for sale. Like I would joke, you want this shirt? It's for sale. Make me an offer. And then the other thing I did was I did a big makeover of my spending habits. Those were the two things I did financially to prepare or give myself options for when I realized what I actually wanted to do. Once I had enough money in savings, or at least what I thought was enough money in savings, I had to figure out what I was going to do with my job because it was like I wasn't in a very remote friendly company at the time. And I was like, do I quit and take a sabbatical, like a 1 year sabbatical? Do I quit and find a remote job somewhere else? Or do I like stay and see if they'll work with me and we could do something remote? Like maybe they'll be creative. The really dealing with my job was like the hardest part of this whole thing because I had this like loyalty to my company, to my employer, the people I worked with. I basically decided to give my employer the right of first refusal and see if I could keep my job, but just do it remotely. And so my boss was like immediately supportive of that. This was like June of 2020. We're in the middle of the pandemic.
Okay.
And I made that request. We were all working remotely already and had been doing for a few months at that moment. And I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. My boss immediately was supportive, but he had to run it past our senior executive team. And after a couple weeks, I got a Zoom meeting invite from my COO for a Friday afternoon meeting at 4 p.m. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow, this is cliche almost, right? And I was
Yeah.
thinking,
Yep.
wow. Basically, during the call, he did say that they decided to eliminate my position. And it's like, wow, okay. But it didn't take long for once that shock wore off that I was like, it was almost like I didn't have a choice once that shock wore off. But then the reality was I had already been financially preparing for this and I wanted to do something. I basically looked at it as like this amazing opportunity. So
It's
basically,
like they
within,
opened the door for you.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I kind of view it, I don't know, like your beliefs, but I almost feel like God intervened and said, and was pointing me in that direction in that
Mhm.
moment. It's just like basically within 2 weeks of that severance money hitting my bank account, I was on a plane to Serbia
Oh,
and
nice.
I've been traveling ever since. I started traveling in August of 2020, navigating all of the COVID travel restrictions and stuff like that, having to figure out what everybody was doing and how to be safe and all of that stuff. In the course of traveling, I learned a lot of things. And then, and since then, I basically started my own business. I started an online community called the Executive Remote Worker. And we help business professionals who can work remotely but want to travel more. In our community, we talk a lot about taking what we call workations, which is the way I define a workation is like basically bringing your like traveling, but bringing your laptop and doing your job with you while you travel. Not, I just wanted to say that because I don't view it as like working while you're on vacation, because that's not what I would recommend. Because I
Yeah.
think there's still a time and a place for disconnecting and taking a vacation and that. But instead, this is another tool in your toolbox where you can travel more without giving up your paycheck, using up all your paid time off, your vacation time at work, or reading for entire.
Do people combine it with vacations? So they maybe work for the first week and then say they book it for a month. They work for the first week and then they've got 3 weeks of vacation. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's many, if you think about this opportunity of working while you're somewhere else, it opens up like an infinite amounts of opportunities. The executive remote worker members came together and we did a 1 month workation in Croatia last September. And everyone decided that they were going to take every Friday off. But we basically worked Monday through Thursday. And then we had Friday, Saturday, Sunday every week off to do whatever fun stuff we wanted to do. And you could see how you could blend a combination of working and workations puts you in a geographic position where you can experience that local
Yeah.
destination when you're not working. But then, like you said, you can tack on days before and after for just vacation stuff, completely disconnected. And you don't have, in that case, when you're in Croatia, you don't have to you're already there. That extra those are extra days of vacation time that you don't have to use up to fly there and back. It's
They're
going to be
already there.
because you're already there.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
the interesting thing too, because you're doing it as a group, you're actually benefiting from the perspectives and what you can learn from other people who are actually on the trip with you. They work for different companies, they work in different ways. What's working in their companies, what's working, and then you can share ideas and collaborate. And this could be diverse industries, right? People who would never have met otherwise are probably coming together and sharing perspectives. And that's the exciting stuff to me because it's like combining drama and coaching or art and science. What do you learn because your background is diverse?
absolutely. Absolutely. And you also build a network of
Yes.
other business leaders who are advocating for similar things. Like you could have, like some people work for companies in different places in this whole remote working space. It's like some are more advanced than others, or however you want to look at it, progressive than others. And there's a advocacy helping other people be advocates at their organizations for these kinds of things and spreading the message. It
Yeah.
crosses industries, just exactly what you say. Crosses industries, it could cross size of organizations. It could, the sky's the limit, really.
That network effect is actually powerful. And then you're building out role models, right? Even within the company to demonstrate how it can actually work. Now, you work mostly with executives, right?
Yeah,
Because they're the ones who have the autonomy and the flexibility more to be able to make these choices.
that's how it has been. We've been focusing more on the more seasoned business professional that's maybe a little more senior in their career, a little more, they maybe have a little more say in what their interests are. I think they can also bring more change to organizations. I think there's benefit with that. But
They have influence to be able to
exactly influence.
negotiate what they need.
Exactly, exactly. I wanted to, and it was like a little bit of a distinction between other communities where there may be more like, uh, I would call them kids in their gap year, or they're not really as like their maybe their career isn't as important, and so it's about partying or something where there's more work is important to everybody in our community and getting the job done and such.
It's interesting that you mentioned gap year because my daughter is in her last year of high school and she's looking at taking a gap year. For me, where I'm actually doing it too is because she wants to travel. Is there an ability? She doesn't necessarily want to travel by herself. For me, can I plan something out that allows us actually go together and I'm working and she's doing a gap year? That's where it's okay. This is where it's fascinating for what could happen in the future as this becomes more widely available because all of a sudden you've got 5 generations working together and how do you spend time together and how do you relate? And for me, this is an opportunity where I could embed my work with my relationship with my daughter and have that flexibility that we're both looking for, but we're coming to it from completely different perspectives.
Gets into more of that nomadic family space, and that is like a super fast growing area where because you may have kids with traveling families, you have kids that are like learning or have school or something on the road. Then you have parents working. And how do you make all of that happen
I'd say
success?
people don't understand what services are available outside of their comfort zone, right? Outside of the
Mhm.
US or outside of Canada for me. And that's maybe where the people that are drawn to your program are, they tend to be older. Their kids tend to be grown up.
Generally speaking, kids are older, out of the house. It's maybe more of the empty nesters.
Yeah,
Want to live their life now.
exactly. And that's where it's like, I can see that they have that level of flexibility that people in midlife with younger children don't necessarily have. And so like you can't do it, but you have to really create and do a lot of work to create the conditions that you need.
Absolutely. I think the I know a lot of nomadic families, and I think the takeaway is it's possible. It's maybe not obvious or easy, but if you want it bad enough, it's possible.
Exactly, that's right. There's one woman I know, they left Ireland because her daughter had severe asthma. They travel for health reasons because her daughter can breathe when they're in warm climates, whereas they can't in colder climates.
Wow.
There's specific reasons that people choose this, right? What do you think actually has to happen for companies to be more flexible, to embed this more into like benefits and programs that they support on an ongoing basis for people who want more of this? Because not everybody will want this opportunity. So
Absolutely.
how do you, what has to change and what's going to encourage companies to make it more mainstream? What do you think?
I suspect we see it every day that there's still a conflict in the return to office space. There's still like a struggle. I think I think that it runs deep. I think there's a change that needs to happen in a lot of organizations to embrace remote working and maybe shed that concept that you have to be in the same place in order to do a good job. Like they say, work is what you do, it's not where you are. I think that philosophy should grow, but that I think there's I envision like an initiative that happens that maybe raises the awareness to businesses that people can be like all of the benefits to letting their employees choose where they work, like taking a workation. They know they can get comfort knowing that there's structured time and place, if you will, to get your work done. And it's no riskier than working from a coffee shop in your hometown. From a cybersecurity perspective, I think that's risky too. There's just changing the mentality of what the risks are of this. Is it they're not going to get they're not going to get the same level of productivity from their employees? Is there more cybersecurity risk? Is it going to be more expensive to the employer? Corporations are all very risk averse if you think about them in general. And if you can convince them or show them that the risk is that how you're going to mitigate the risk or how it's really not that risk, maybe you can change attitudes and open up minds to the possibilities to.
I agree with you that a lot of it is about worldview and mindset about what work is and where it has to happen and when it has to happen. And that is deep seated. It really comes down to the intention that the employer has for what they want from their employees, what they want their employer brand to be. And then you've got companies that where that flexibility is easier because a lot of times that is a key part of their business. For example, Airbnb, for example, has one of the most flexible policies out there and they can work employees there, I think, can work anywhere up to 90 days, and it's employee's choice, right? But it really comes down to the fact that their business is rooted in that flexibility and it benefits them as an employer to promote that type of. That's where you start with industries where you can see that there's a direct relation to the business and how that company is profitable and is that maybe the easier sell for
Yeah.
that type of mentality, right? Or even like we talked briefly in our conversation before, to build it on to things that are already normalized. For example, conferences, right? Generally, especially executives will travel to conferences. Sometimes they're even speaking, right? And think about Davos, right? That's a big time conference, right? Typically a lot of people build vacation onto either end of that conference, right? They're going, they're working. It's accepted that has to happen in that particular location. Times are going to be flexible. It's going to be all governed by the conference. And then they might build in like a week or like a few days before or either after. And that's an example of a workation, right? Is that maybe what the opportunity is to talk to employers about the type of travel that's already normalized and really do experiments to how you can expand that.
It's in my brother is in he lives in Singapore, but he's in Tuscany, Italy right now for a work conference. And
Nice.
he went a couple days early and I think he's going to stay a couple days late after taking like vacations. That's vacation time. But if you think about it, and I think this is how you're spin, saying this is instead of a couple days before and a couple days after it, how I would think of it is like, why not go a week before and stay a week after and you can, and maybe work during those times. And then you're not using any like of your vacation time and you can save that for when you're with your family. I don't know, just who
Yeah,
knows, right? There's all these possibilities on how that could look. I like what you're suggesting. It's like taking something that's already normal. Like who wouldn't go take vacation, a couple of days of vacation before and after a trip to Tuscany, right? Or
exactly. That's right. You're just going to be stunned by the light and the pasta and it's how often do you get to go to Italy? That's where it's something that people understand intuitively is a nice to have. And why not? Because think of the benefits for employee engagement and even employee advocacy. What does that say about you as an employer as an attractive place to work?
right.
That your employees are then posting about their experience and going to that conference, learning, sharing their knowledge and expertise, but then also benefiting from it personally, right? That's an
Yep.
attractive employer brand. I'd be interested in somebody who's willing to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like the one thing that when we talked the last time, that idea of what I would envision is like having employers promoting their employees to maybe go somewhere for a month and work like as a benefit. And like you had suggested in our last discussion, which I thought was awesome, the idea like maybe not everybody wants to do this, but a lot of people do. how about I don't know, a company says, we'll pick 4 people every year that can go take a workation program. People who want to do this could apply for it. And almost, I could envision almost them creating like a business case that would, like how it would, how it also would benefit the employer, putting it in their perspective. And what happens? Okay, these employees go to Europe for a month to live and work. What happens when they come back?
Mhm.
Okay, they agreed to do a sharing or maybe some presentation of what they learned, like the top 7 things that they learned or whatever, right? Like some giving back to the organization in a way of things they learned while they were on that trip or
Yeah.
something like that.
And honestly, I think that happens because the organization that I used to work with, we had several locations in the Philippines. People often would actually go several months to the Philippines to actually train their subject matter experts, and they would actually working at the offices in the Philippines. But there's opportunity for vacation built into that. And my husband mentioned that my sister-in-law had done that with her company just recently as well too. She had to go for 2 weeks, but then I think they paid for her to take a week of vacation. They paid her for, I don't know the full story, but that's an example too, right? This is a way that you could actually personalize and customize the benefits that you offer to employees because not everybody benefits from the standard package. If you have somebody, for example, who chooses not to have children, isn't a caregiver, isn't really interested in what you offer in terms of maternity leave, paternity leave, caregiving leave, subsidization for like babysitting, all of that stuff isn't going to be attracted to that particular person because of their life choices. What's an offer that would be attractive? That's a way.
Absolutely. And that's interesting. This whole idea of traveling was something like I never had children of my own. And it was like, I, I almost had like a chip on my shoulder because it was like, I never got 3 months away from work. I
Yes.
basically started working when I was 22 and in a full time job. And it was like, oh, I wanted to be able to take time off and do things that I never got to do. And that, no, you hit the nail on the head that it's just like another offering, another something that would be attractive to maybe not everybody, but a lot of people. And I
And
always
it's
think about, oh, I was just going to say, I always think about like movie tickets, like something simple like that. Like companies offer that. Well, that doesn't benefit anybody that doesn't care about going to see movies.
And that's the thing. If you make it available, it's transparent, it's fair, it's equitable, then I think you have to be careful how you design it. But I think that's a way that you could customize and personalize your offerings. I used to work with this guy. He didn't want kids, and I had kids. And he got very upset because he felt like he was having to do extra work because if my kids were sick, he would have to step in. And he was on a team with mostly mothers. And he felt put upon. And I understood it, but at the same time, it's okay, that's the way they designed the work. But what ended up happening is he complained so badly that they ended up promoting him into another role where he didn't have that resilience factor. He didn't have to do the backup. And I understood that too. But at the same time, he got promoted. He got a salary increase. That's not there. And that's where
Yeah.
it's like this sort of thing, if you are applying for it and it's equitable and it's fair and anybody could really pursue it if they want to, and there's clear understanding of how it gets decided, then that could be more interesting. I think that,
You hit it. It's like transparency and
yeah,
being upfront. And I think if you were an employer and let's say you had this benefit where you like let your employees work from anywhere for a month or something like that once a
yep,
year, I could see it being like this huge marketing thing. It's like, oh, we're cool. We do this. But that if the devil's in the details. And if it's like only a small fraction of people can do this, then it makes it seem like a little less, it seems more like a marketing tactic than a real. And as you said in a past discussion, living the values of the company. Like
yes.
that's important too. It's not just some gimmick. Oh, we're cool. We let people work from anywhere for a month every year or whatever.
And then it's also like the return on investment is what are we getting out of this because we made it available? Yes, that's usually a factor, but if you're going to pull the program because you don't get that expected return on investment, then what's the value of that? And people are going to resent that, right? That's where is it a perk? Is it benefit? Is it a program? Or is that something that's embedded into DNA and the bone structure of how your organization is created? And I can tell you that I'm a lot more attracted to companies like Airbnb who embed it, right? And it almost becomes permissionless because it's something that's available and it's transparent to everyone, right? And the limit there of 90 days is because of tax factors and visa issues. And that's the sweet spot, the 90 days, right? Not every company is going to want to be able to do that, but because they haven't necessarily done the other work that goes along to understanding how location and time flexibility really impacts their operations, right? And that's the
Totally.
other part of this, like, how is this going to be something that can be operationalized, right? Going to be an impact to operations. And that's the other part that you really have to understand as well too. And it can be done. It's really just having that mindset and that inclination to offer something creative, right? The other factor that I wanted to bring up is climate impact, right? Because obviously you're traveling, but how do you minimize your carbon impact, the impact to the climate? Because you tend to stay in one location, right?
I think the best way that I would put it is I think slow travel is the answer to a lot of that. Not, I think in the past, there's been a lot of, which goes hand in hand with a workation because every time you move, it's risky for work. I just wrote an article about how about all one of the commandments of like remote working should be like, don't move too much because every time you move, you lose time and it's more risky. If your new place isn't set up with good Wi-Fi or figuring it all out. But slow travel, I think, is definitely the answer. We basically, being in the US, it's a little limited to go places without being on like an airplane, but we spend about a third of the year in Mexico, a third of the year in the US, visiting our family and friends, and then a third of the year in Europe. That's been our rotation. We go to Europe once a year, and once we're there, we're staying for 6 months at a time. Maybe
And
about
you
6
take day trips and like
Yep.
train.
And then once you're there, trains are the ideal scenario there. Buses, trains, and then when you're in large cities, of course, it's like Budapest, for example, they have like amazing public transportation to get around. Just if you can plan your trip around major transportation cities, hubs for trains and buses and stuff like that. Once we're there, it's like limiting those long haul flights across the Atlantic is a big one.
It just takes strategic planning,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
What are the other skills that you notice that people who engage in workations are really developing by actually working in this way?
I think the big skill set that I've seen is there's people that think that you're just on a vacation and sprinkling in a little bit of work. I think the reality is they're getting they're being like a lot more productive than they even thought they would be when they're places. Cause there's, first of all, I think the environment, like switching, I think there's a lot of benefits to switching up your environment for like creativity and energy. Like you get a new energy when you're in a new place and that sort of thing. But I think you're also in a place where you want to get your work done. And we're all in stages of our life where our work is really important. We want to do a good job and we want to get it done, but we also want to be done so that we can go have those like authentic, amazing local experiences and learn about the culture and the history of wherever we're at. And I think it puts more of a laser focus on getting your work done and that you can enjoy where you're at as well. Right.
It's tapping into an intrinsic motivation that you have to be done your work and get it done faster and more quickly that you could go and enjoy the benefits of your surroundings.
Exactly. Exactly. No offense to people in Nebraska. I guess I could use Minnesota as an example too, but it's
Therapy to both.
if you're gonna go, we have to tell ourselves that when we travel and work, because it's okay, we need to go do something fun. We can't just sit here in our condo and work 24/7 because then we might as well be in Nebraska or Minnesota or whatever. It's like you're in a particular place for a reason. You want to take advantage of that too.
And don't choose places where it's all about cheese and beer because as far as I can tell, what's exciting about Nebraska? That's football, but we won't go there. Watch the Super Bowl for Rihanna.
Exactly. Exactly. I think the reality of what this lifestyle could be is what people learn while they're on a workcation. And it's maybe not what they thought it was going to be. I think they think going into it they're not going to be able to get any work done, but I think the reality is they do, and they do a good job. And then when they're not working, they're having amazing experiences wherever they are.
Do they change their workload? Do they actually let tasks go? Because some of the best job crafting that's out there is just stopping doing what's not necessary. What can you subtract from your job description, from your task list, that's really going to allow you to focus on the work that really fuels the business? Are you finding that's what people are doing?
Exactly. I think that there when you're not spreading your work out, that you're doing it 24/7, I think you're being a little more judicious about what tasks you're doing and making sure that you're only doing the things that really add value and move the needle. And I think that really helps them get a better focus on what they need to do every day in that amount of time that they've allotted. I think that you'd probably find people doing more value add tasks and less maybe fluffy tasks that make you feel like you're being productive and doing a lot of work, but you're really not helping the business at all.
Like getting to inbox zero. Feels good, almost never happens, and doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
True.
Exactly. Focusing on those important tasks is a
Yeah.
big one.
And that's the thing that could improve work everywhere, right? If you're taking people out of their locations and teaching them this skill and helping them learn that almost because it's baked into the concept, they can then take that back to their offices and be role models to help other people do that. And the more
Absolutely.
efficiently people work, the more time they have to take time for themselves.
I wonder if that also is something, an effect that you'll get from a lot of these organizations going to the 4-day work week. You're com- compressing it down. Your work week is compressed by 20%.
Yes, exactly. That's right. You have to focus on the things that see the bottom line because you're moving from 40 hours to 32, right? So you
Yep.
just have
Yep.
8 hours less, right? Therefore, it's like you're questioning the number of meetings you're on, whether you should do that, what you can do asynchronously, because if the meeting is really just about an information update, just put it in a document that's shared, right? That's
Absolutely.
how you can reduce it and be more intentional.
Absolutely. And I know you've had past conversations with guests about like synchronous work and
Yes.
asynchronous work, and it's like huge topic. It's
Yes.
like that will also fundamentally change. That's a whole nother layer with functioning and such too. There's so many opportunities for people, and the synchronous versus asynchronous work changes because one of the big obstacles people think they have is time zones. And what we have found is working US business hours, especially like on the East Coast, for example, and working from Europe is amazing. We love it. And we hear that all the time from people that they love living in Europe, but working US business hours because you have the whole morning and early afternoon to yourself to wake up without an alarm, go to the cafe and have coffee, maybe go for a hike, swim in the sea. You're all like listen to a podcast on the beach, then you're refreshed and it's 3 o'clock and you're ready in the afternoon and you're ready to start the day. And to us, that's perfect. Now, going to Southeast Asia is difficult for us because of that's not 6, 7 hours difference, that's 12 hours difference.
Yes.
That time where you have to be synchronous with the
Yeah.
US business, that's tricky. And I'm too old to be like doing business calls at 2 in the morning or whatever.
I don't think anybody wants to do that. I once did an interview for a reporter in India, and it was 9 o'clock my time, but she was at 7 o'clock, I think, the next morning. And I'm like, wow, that takes dedication. But that's where it's like, what has to be synchronous, right? You can still completely do that and then minimize how many times you would actually have to line up the time zone, right? By
Yep,
being really intentional about how the work is done. And that's where the documentation, the transparency, the intention about when people have to meet can be really impactful, both in the office, but also working remotely just in the US or Canada. And then when you're on a road as well too, right? Because I used to have to travel for work just like you did, right? And somebody would have to do my work because I wasn't available, like I was doing different work, right? Because I was actually meeting people. And then how can you rejig your workload to make it more impactful?
That's another one that you just triggered it, my memory. When I used to travel for work, it was like I go visit a client or go to conferences or whatever, but and then it's, oh, I got to go back to the hotel and get some work done.
Yes.
It only was like the mission critical work that got done. Otherwise, it would always just, I'll do it when I get back to the office. And I heard many people say that. And it's like with a workcation, there's a mentality, it's a shift in mindset. You're
Yes.
not, you, you don't go somewhere. You can't go to Croatia for a month and put off really all of your work until you get back into the office. It doesn't work like that. It's a mindset shift. And it's like, you're working. You're really working. You have to get your work done.
Yeah.
It's not a vacation and it's not something you can wait until you get back to the office.
You can't just postpone all the deadlines, right? Or get somebody else to work for you for the work that isn't ideal to do on the road. That's where it's like, how can you redesign the work that you do to make sure that you're able to do the workation properly? And do you have the authority to do that? What has to factor in there? Executives, like we talked about before, might have more autonomy, more flexibility, more say to negotiate the type of work and tasks that they do. They might be able to delegate, right? Somebody who's a project manager might not have that level of authority to redesign their job description completely. That's a challenge, I think, if we're looking to scale and expand that to other roles.
And I think that's where, just in general, the remote figuring out embedding that remote work culture and synchronous versus asynchronous work is all intertwined in all of this. And I can see, um, I feel as if you could get executives bought into this, they're more likely to affect change and let it permeate lower throughout the organization. And maybe there be more opportunities for other people as well. If you can get them to understand that.
What is it going to take? It changes more about how do you change the story that you tell? And that's where it's like you're wise to really be working with the executives because they're the ones who are making the rules for everyone else. If you can influence them and help them understand that the rules are malleable and things can change and they can understand that at a personal level, then they are placed in position to really move the needle for everybody else. Right.
Absolutely.
So that's
Absolutely.
where it's all about the storytelling as well. And it's the individual story, but also the corporate storytelling. That's important. But we can't do a travel podcast without talking about like where do you get the best deals and what's the challenge about picking out the right condo? How do you
Oh,
choose the
yeah.
locations, that sort of thing? Do you have any tips you'd like to leave us with?
Oh my gosh, that's like my favorite topic. I could spend like days on this just from the, we, I started taking workations back in 2014 when I was still in the corporate world. I was working in Virginia, but all my family and friends were back in Minnesota. I had negotiated the ability to periodically go back to Minnesota to live and work. But then in the last 3 years, I've been doing this full time, basically like we typically stay for 1 to 3 months in one place. And it's like a comp flights is a big one. I like to say don't cheap out on flights because we're not taking red eyes. We're not having like super long connections and layovers. Um, we don't like a 6 a.m. flight as I don't want to go be at the airport by 3:30 or 4.
I saw one time you commented on something. You said you use Google Flights most.
Oh, yes.
Is that how you filter it out?
Uh-huh. I do Google Flights a lot. Other people have said, and I started to play around with it, but Skyscanner and Kayak are other. And what I do is I would search for them. Let's just use Google Flights as an example, because you could toggle all these different filters and then see. And then when you have the flexibility of the days that you're going to travel, you're not like locked into like your 1 week vacation from this date to this date. But if you have the flexibility, it's like, all right, we know we want to go to Croatia and I don't want a duration of more than like 24 hours, right? And the times, and you can add all this filtering. Then you can see, it gives you the calendar and you can see which days have the cheapest flights that based on their criteria and stuff. It's like, all right, we're going April 12th. We were maybe going to go April 20th, but it was $400 cheaper. We're doing that.
And that way you could choose the cheaper flight, but then add on upgrades. Quality.
I book all our flights through the actual airline itself. Or the only other time I do is we have a lot of points through like Chase Sapphire's travel or Chase's travel. We'll maybe book flights that way too using rewards. But otherwise, we pretty much book through the airline itself. We use for accommodations, we by far use Airbnb as our platform because I like scouring the pictures, the reviews, um, messaging the host to ask questions because we need one, we stay places longer, we get the monthly discount, but that's a double edged sword because we get the monthly discount. But if it sucks, we're stuck because you don't get a refund. We want to make sure, oh, does the bed look comfortable? We don't want a studio because we don't want to work where we sleep, basically. Is it in a good location? How's the Wi-Fi? Because that's super important for remote workers. What do the workspaces look like? Is there tables for both of us to work? Because I travel with my partner. We need two workspaces, those types of things.
That's an excellent lead magnet. Do you have something like that
I
where it's a
do
listing of all
actually.
of those?
I do. I have how to find remote friendly accommodation.
You'll have to send me that and we can put
Yes.
that in the show notes because I
Oh,
think whether people are traveling as workations or even just traveling for a regular vacation, that's a useful thing for people. We should definitely put that in. Anything else you want to leave us with before we wrap up?
uh, no, I'm just like, this has become my personal mission to help people travel more. If there's anything like I can do to help anybody, I'd like love for them to reach out to me. And I'm very much on LinkedIn, Christy Sullivan on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, uh, Christy Diaz. Well, maybe we could put links in the
Yeah,
show
I'll
notes or
definitely put
something about
links in
that.
the show notes. Yeah.
Um, my website's executive-remote-worker.com. I have an events page if you want to join a workation that we do 3 or 4 times a year. Members come together, we travel together, making sure that we're setting aside sufficient time for working as well as some planned and unplanned fun activities that we can do while we're there. I'm just happy to help anybody that wants to make this happen.
Yeah, and you don't have to wait until you retire to take advantage of traveling. And that's a key message that I've noticed in a lot of your content as well. And that's something that appealed to me because my mother-in-law died at 53, my father-in-law died at 61. He literally had just been retired for maybe about 18 months. And then he just keeled over from a massive heart attack. And he didn't get to travel the world like he had planned.
I
And like
literally have to.
your family is being impacted by that too. But it's like this is a way where you are living while you're working. You're not working to live after retirement. And that's just a thought that I wanted to emphasize before we wrap up. That's something that Christy can definitely help. Thank you for making the time. It's really impressive. And you're going to send me a picture of something pretty and fun that we can imagine your environment in Mexico right now, especially for people who are snowbound like Canada.